Hey guys, this is MoglyphFX aka Frameworks. This video is a tutorial about how to use my Moglyph FX procedural cloning and animation toolset for After Effects used in conjunction with BoundaryFill plugin, which is also available on aescripts. So this is a really powerful new plugin from Repiece, and I will try to demonstrate the possibilities of using both these awesome products. And if you are interested in purchasing both these products, please head up to either of BoundaryFill or Moglyph FX webpage on aescripts and find the banner that resembles this image, which is the bundle banner. And if you click on Add Both to Cart button, it will allow you to benefit from a nice 15% discount. So really interesting combo, really interesting deal. So now it's time to show you how to use both these awesome products together. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, now we are in After Effects, and as you can see in my layout, I've got Moglyph FX version, if I go to Info and License version 4.2, that is already docked in my layout. And I've got also, if I search in Effects and Presets, BoundaryFill plugin installed. So I will apply this later. And I've got a few assets ready to be used by BoundaryFill. So this is one of the assets I will be using for the demonstration at the beginning. And so this is a simple pre-comp with some numbers that are the numbered frames of the composition. And this composition is set to be exactly 500 wide and 500 tall in pixels. And very, very important, the frame rate here is 25, because you have, if you want to use BoundaryFill correctly, to have a frame rate that is a finite number. What I want to explain here is that if I divide 1 full second by 25, I will end up with a frame rate that is finite, okay? But if you have 1 second divided by, let's say, 30 frame rate, we'll end up with an infinite number of floating points. And this is bad if you want to use BoundaryFill. So be sure to use something like 25 as a frame rate, for example. So 525 here. Okay, and now I will bring this number texture in another pre-comp, another composition. And this composition will be my main composition. So I can have something like maybe a square format, and I will have a duration of 5 seconds, for example, and I will stick with 25 frame rate. So my numbered textures is smaller than my composition, and if I dezoom a bit in my timeline, I can see that these numbered textures pre-composition finished sooner than the duration of my comp. So I will hide this layer for now. And now I will create a simple grid cloner with my Moglyph FX toolset. So let's click on Grid Cloner and be sure to have Moglyph Basic Geometry chosen as your default font. This is very important for Moglyph FX to create square shapes. So I will stick with Moglyph Basic Geometry, which should be the default font in your case if you haven't changed this in your settings. And I will click on Grid Cloner. And I will instantly end up with a nice grid of 5 by 5 clones. And if I go to Objects, I can choose the count on X and the count on Y. So I can, for example, add more clones on X and more clones on Y. And the first thing you really have to ensure while using Moglyph FX in conjunction with BoundaryFill is to make sure that your clones don't overlap. This is very important. So please do not have something like this, because now if I, let's say, go to transform, and if I have a stroke that is dark, for example, with this stroke here, you can see that all my clones are all overlapping, and this is bad boundary fill. So you need to ensure that the gap here is sufficient to separate each clone from each other. This is very important for now. Okay, so now I've got my clones that are generated by Moglyph FX, and I can just twirl up this Moglyph cloner here, and this is my distribution that I like for now. And I will just click on Effect and Presets and search for boundary, so BoundaryFill, and I will double click to apply this to my Moglyph cloner grid layer. And now, as you can see, you end up with a second effect called BoundaryFill 2, and you have a red button here called Text Save. So by default, this is red because it hasn't recorded the matrix, so the position, scale, rotation of each clone. So this is normal that it's red, and you can't really use BoundaryFill plugin correctly until this button is still red. So if you click on this now, it has recorded correctly the position of each clone here, which is great. But it didn't record it yet the rotation and scale of these glyphs. So I have to go to Texture first, go to Enable, and as you can see, you didn't have dynamic rotation and dynamic scale checked on by default. So depending on what you want to do, you'll have to tick these options on by yourself. Otherwise, it won't take into consideration the rotation of your clones you will animate with Moglyph FX. So just for now, I will leave it as it is because I won't play with rotation and scale right now, and I will just leave these options as they are right now. So I will twirl up this guy here, and the first thing that I will do to BoundaryFill plugin is to decrease the values of merge X and merge Y. By default, this is 50, but as you can see, if I, you won't see anything right now because I didn't apply any texture yet. So I will, as you can see, you have the number textures, that is the layer behind, and I will reference this numbers texture. I will re-hide this layer here. I will reference this numbers texture pre-comp here in the texture. So texture mode, I will stick with one layer by default, and I will go to texture layer, and here I will select numbers textures. And as you can see, it has created a texture for all my clones, but it's way too big. So how does it work for correctly rescale this? You'll have to go to Texture, Transform, and you'll have to scale this by a specific factor. So the factor you'll need to use depend on the size of the texture you use as your pre-comp. So in my numbers textures, if you remember correctly, I had a texture that is 500 wide and 500 tall. So you have to note that Moglyph FX has a basic square shape as a default that is exactly 100 wide and 100 pixels tall. So this is a factor of 145. So 100, and my textures is 500. So I will just divide 100 here by 5. So of course you can calculate this by easily, but depending on your dimensions, it's nice to have the formula. So 100 divided by the number of the ratio. So here it's 20%. And now if I go to at the bottom of BoundaryFill, I can just click on shape only. And as you can see, all my textures are now rescaled correctly based on the squares I had duplicated with my Moglyph cloner. So now that everything is set up correctly, I can just go back to Moglyph cloner and I can play with the gap, for example, on X, or the gap on Y. And if I want to, I can now put 0 if needed, and now they can overlap. Okay, but you can't make them overlap until you have hit the text save button. But now that is all saved, you can play and overlap them if you want to. So I will stick with the X and Y gap to 0, so all my squares are next to each other, like making a nice grid of squares. And I can, if I want to, let's say I want to rotate on rotation Z my squares, you will see what it will be doing. As you can see, you can't see anything, because if I uncheck the shape only, I will retrieve the shape of my glyphs. If I rotate my clones, it will do that. And it happens because for now, since I haven't enabled yet the rotation and scale, it won't take the rotation nor the scale accordingly. But now if I click on rotation, and if I click on text save again, you can see that now something weird happened. So if I now play with the rotation, the texture will also rotate, right? So of course this is a bit weird for now, because this is rotated with value of 45 degrees, so you'll have to counter rotate here in the transform of BoundaryFill plugin. So you can do something like that, for example. So those values will depend on what you do, so you'll have to figure out by yourself. But now, as you can see, it works correctly. So I can now play with the Moglyph cloner and play with the rotation Z in transform. And this transform property is available for all the type of cloners of Moglyph FX. So you can play with rotation, you can also play with scale, but I will go back to this later. So for now, I will just leave dynamic scale unchecked. And this was just for little explanation for rotation, but I will also uncheck the dynamic rotation for now. So rotation, I will zero this out too. So now how does this work? So I will twill up the Moglyph cloner and just try to explain what BoundaryFill does. So I will go to texture. As you can see, I've referenced already my numbers textures precomp, and the time sampling by default is current time. So if I play my animation, as you can see, all the frames correspond to what happens inside the precomp. So if I go there, I will go further than the duration of my precomp, and I will end up with nothing, which is totally normal because this is just the current time and there isn't anything after this time. And if I go back to numbers textures, as you can see, I've got only 16 frames. But now if I go to time sampling and go to current time loop, I can go further than my duration, and it will iterate and cycle through the duration of my precomp textures and continue and do it again and again as a loop. So this is very cool. And another cool feature here is the time offset. So be aware that the time offset and the random offset here, even if the name offset isn't written in the random features here, the random will also benefit from time offset here. So time offset and random here will all benefit from the time offset in second right there. And this is why I told you that you had to have a frame rate that is finite, because you can now have something like this. So you can type 1 divided by your frame rate. And if you remember correctly, my frame rate is 25. So I will end up with this value, which is the frame duration from my project. So now it says to me that I can offset by 1 frame exactly, and if I choose time offset, as you can see, if I go back here, I will have this animation, which is pretty cool. So each clone has an index, and depending on the index, it will offset by the amount of time offset here in the pre-comp. So if I choose time offset, it will just play the pre-comp animation 1 single time, like this. And if I choose now time offset still frame, it will do the exact same thing. So it will distribute by index of my clones and by the number of frames contained in my pre-comp animation. And if I play the animation now, since it's still frame, it will remain still. And the other last mode here in time offset is time offset loop. And of course it will do the exact same thing than time offset, but it will manage to loop after the duration of my pre-comp. So it will allow you to have something like this, which is pretty cool too. Okay, as you can see, each frame, it will animate each clone with a time offset of 1 frame exactly. And once it will hit the end of my duration from the numbers textures pre-comp, like this, 1 frame later, boom, it will return back to the first frame, and it will continue again and again. So this is really interesting and really useful. The other mode you have is random. So if I choose random one play, it will just randomize the animation based on my clone's index, but it will animate this only 1 single time. So this is a really nice animation already, so very cool. You can imagine a lot of cool glitch animation with that. Okay, because of course these textures aren't really interested, but I will showcase a few interesting texture types afterward. So this is random one play, and you can also play with random still frame. Of course, if you have random still frame, so in this case, which is a bit weird, is that you'll have to sorry, I've got a refreshing issue here, but it's working, right? So yep. So it will randomize the still frame to populate your clones, and you can also play with random loop. So random still frame remains still, just like the time offset still frame, and the random loop will continue to animate the clones. And if I play the animation, it will randomize completely the distribution and play the animation again and again. So very cool also to have this possibility. Okay, so this is it for the time sampling options. And of course, if I go back to time offset here, I can also choose not to have a time offset to exactly 1 frame, but if I double this with maybe 0.08, I will skip all the even number of frames, of course, because I've doubled the frame rate here. Sorry, I've divided the frame rate in this case. A bit complicated to figure out, but this is a simple calculation. So by doing that, I've managed to skip all even frame here. So this is really up to you what you want to do with those values here. So if I type 2, for example, and not 4, I will have this distribution with now the double amount of frames for each clone. So this is interesting too. So I will stick with 4, which is exactly the duration of 1 frame. And another cool thing that I can do is to go to color, and Actually, I want to use color right now. I will stick with time offset loop, so I can have all my clones here apply to all of the textures apply to all my clones. And I can go to color, and if I play with opacity, which is 0 by default, I can increase this to 100 by default. Okay, and now as you can see, depending on the index of each glyph, which is the first one here and last one here, I have the gradient correctly mapped to all the values, to all the clones by step, which is very, very great. So I have the mode that is gradient, but I also have random and also check pattern. So this is also cool. You have this stripe here because I've got an even amount of count X and count Y columns and rows in my grid. But if I had 7 here, as you can see now that I have an odd number of clones on X, I have this alternate version of check pattern here, which is also very nice. So I will undo that. And now if I play with blending mode, if I go back to gradient, I can see that I have in front by default, but I can also choose another thing like add, for example, or multiply, and or overlay maybe. So in my case, since those are very vibrant colors, I will stick with multiply for the demonstration. So you can stick with random, you can play with check patterns, of course, and I can also, change the colors of the gradient. So if I choose red here and maybe cyan here, as you can see, you can put the gradient you want exactly. So this is pretty great. I will undo that, and I will stick to gradient and put this back to 0. So this is very nice. Another cool thing is that you can go up to 3 different layers referenced as your textures. So by default, this is 1 layer. So I've got only texture layer here available. But if I choose 2 layers, I have now a second texture layer slot that I can use to populate with other textures. So in my composition here, I have only these numbers textures right now, but I can also use another pre-comp. Let's say, for example, this AE abstract textures, which is this very nice animations I've did with native effects of After Effects, so grids, checkerboard, gradient, 4-point gradient, noise, yeah, this kind of stuff. So this is called AE abstract textures. Of course, you can use anything you want. So I will put this in my composition. You can see it below my clones. I will hide it. As you can see, both textures are the same size. This is also important if you want to have something that is uniform. So it also is 500 wide and 500 tall in pixels. So this is important to keep in mind. And sorry, I've closed my yeah, this is my main comp. Okay, so this composition is longer in duration, but this is not important. You can hide it, and I will choose and reference this AE abstract textures in this texture layer 2 slot because I've chosen texture mode 2 layers. I will stick with this, and now we can see that it will iterate through my number textures, and the second one will be replaced with the second texture, which is the AE abstract texture, and so on, which is very, very cool. So you can, if you have multiple textures here, and you can go up to 3 layers, just to keep in mind, you can texture offset by 0 by default it's 0. This is why the first texture, which is the numbers, is chosen as a first, but if I put 1, it will be the inverse, and the first clone will inherit from the texture layer 2 because I've offset the number by 1, right? So this is how you will cycle through one texture or the other. And by default, it's still animated because I've chosen time offset loop, but I could use time offset still frame, for example. And if I choose still frames, you can see that I've got more available textures in this AE abstract textures because it's longer, while in this numbers texture, it won't be a sufficient amount of textures, so it will stick and be empty right now. So if you don't want that, ensure that you have a sufficient amount of source available in both your textures. And yeah, you can also, if I go back to loop, okay, cool. You can also choose to texture random if I tick on this option. And if I do that, it won't cycle and iterate through one or the other. It will just pick randomly one or the other for my clones. And as soon as you have random here, or with random mods here, let's say random still frames, for example, you can completely randomize the seed by playing with the seed option at the bottom of the BoundaryFill to effect. So if I play with this value here, I will completely randomize the distribution of my textures. So this is it for texture random mod. And of course, you can also play with a third layer here. So in this case, it will make some of my clones empty, but if I uncheck the texture random and if I do not offset the texture, I will see that each texture here will, the first texture, one texture over 3 will be the first texture. The second one will be the AE abstract texture, and the third one will be empty because I didn't put any reference here in this texture layer 3 slot yet. But I can also play maybe with a third layer, which could be the pixels photo texture. So this is also a comp that is 500 pixels wide and tall. And these are just some nice photographs I've taken from the Pexels free open source photo website. And I will put this pre-comp in my comp also. So I will hide this one too. And I will select for my third texture layer 3 slot, I will select this Pexels photo texture. And instantly, boom, you have this really nice distribution of all these different textures. So this is pretty great. And now, what is really cool is that you can still play with Moglyph Cloner options. Like I want to have some gap between the X and Y squares, and I can put these here, for example. And now I've got all these options to play with. So this is fully dynamic, fully procedural and non-descriptive. So this is really cool. And you can also play with maybe the different other options of MoglyphFX, like the taper grids option that allows you to create nice pyramidal shapes, for example. And you can also, if I undo that, you can also apply some effectors. So if I select my Moglyph Cloner and click on effectors and maybe play with formula, it will automatically animate this in a nice wavy animation. And there are some issues where the textures changes and randomly change, and this is because BoundaryFill plugin consider some of the clones as a same entity if they are overlapping. So be sure to not have some groups of clones overlapping each other too much. And you can also play with the merge X and merge Y options, which allow you to consider some clones that are next to each other in a specific range. So in this case, 50 pixels wide and tall. So if I decrease this value to 1, and if I tick off this effector and go back to text save, okay, and if I tick on this formula effector, I will manage to, yeah, as you can see, I don't have this issue anymore, which is pretty cool. So I managed to tell BoundaryFill, okay, all my clones are separated from each other, just because I've decreased this merge X and merge Y value. So this is how to deal with this animation and overlapping glyphs when it happens. So this is pretty cool. And of course, effector formula has a lot of options to play with. So you can go to curve and play with the frequency to have bigger wave animation, something like this, for example, and play with the curve interpolation. And yeah, you can have really nice motion. You can even tick the loop on comp duration checkbox, and it will automatically loop your animation during your composition. So this is pretty cool. So let's finish the preview, and just a few seconds more. And yeah, this is really cool animation down in seconds. So yeah, really nice animation, fully procedural, non-destructive, and of course you can have any kind of textures in your programs. So this is pretty great. There are a few other options that you need to be aware of while dealing with some few specific things in BoundaryFill. I will try to explain you right now. So in order for me to explain this, I will just remove effector formula by going to MoglyphFX, other, and remove effect. So I'm back to this normal distribution, and just for the sake of simplicity, I will go back to one single texture as a texture mode. So one layer, and I will stick with, actually I like the Pexels photo textures a lot, so I will select this. And yeah, the thing I wanted to demonstrate is how to deal with scale when you activate dynamic scale. So if I tick this option, dynamic scale, and if I uncheck shape only, and if I choose transform mode to behind, as you can see, as soon as I play with transform in Moglyph Cloner, transform rotation Z, as you can see, you don't really see the clones, the green initial clones turning, but you can see that the photographs are adapting their size to match the size of my rotated square. So in order to better understand, I will go back to transform mode in front. So now if my clones aren't rotated, you just see the green squares from Moglyph FX, which are your normal glyphs. But if you play with rotation Z in Moglyph Cloner transform here, as you can see, since I have enabled dynamic scale, it will try to match the bounding box, and this is why it's called BoundaryFill after all, of my rotated squares. So this is important to keep in mind, and this is why sticking with the default Moglyph basic geometry, which has this perfect 100 by 100 centered square, it really is really the perfect default shape for boundary fill. So if I continue to play with rotation Z, at one moment it will, if I go if I go further than 45 degrees, my photograph will be the biggest size. But if I go further, I will start reducing their size again back to their normal size. And this is due, if I put 60 for example, this is due to the fact that by default, when you check a dynamic scale, you have dynamic scale enabled, and the dynamic scale mode is set to fit height. But if I choose fit diagonal, it will adapt the size to this size instead, not the boundary fill, not the boundary of my rotated square, but the diagonal here. So this is important to keep in mind. I will stick to fit width, and if I click on none, it won't adapt the scale to my clones at all. So if I sorry, I misunderstood this parameter. So yeah, it will adapt your scale anyway. So I will stick with fit width. And what if you had not a square but something else in MoglyphFX? So let me show you what I mean. So if I have in the rotation Z 0, and if I untick the boundary fill plugin for now, I can add another shape to my Moglyph cloner that is not the square shape. So to do that, I will go to Moglyph Basic Geometry font dropdown here, and I will select something that is not uniform. So actually, I will stick with this basic geometry here, and I will first demonstrate with a circle. So I want a circle and not a square. So Moglyph Basic Geometry, click on Add New Glyph with your Moglyph cloner grid selected, and click on this guy here, which is the number 51 glyph, and this is the perfect circle for Moglyph cloner. So I click on that, and instantly you have a new circle replacing all your squares. And since this is still a uniform shape, it won't change anything because this is the same size as the square. So if I go back to boundary fill, as you can see, the button has turned red because it says to you, hey, you have changed something in your initial font setup. So please text save at the frame 0. So be sure to be at frame 0 and do not have any animation yet. And be sure to that all your clones are not overlapping and not rotated yet. So click on text save, and now it's okay. So now, as you can see, the transform mode is set to in front. If I click on shape only, of course, the photograph remains without the glyph at all. But if I untick this shape only, and if I play with transform mode, not to be in front, but in add mode, for example, as you can see, it managed to composite my initial green circles on top of my photographs. So you can play with other blending mode like multiply. And of course, the color you have in Moglyph cloner transform here fill color. This will determine the color of what's going on here. So I can type, I can put something yellow, for example, and you can see that the yellow circle is multiplied by the photograph behind. And as you can see, I can also choose add, and can also choose exclusion. And now I've got this nice compositing of my circles over the photograph, which is also very cool. And the mode I like the most is the stencil alpha, because the stencil alpha, oh, there is a little typo issue in the drop down here. This is normally written stencil, just like that, stencil alpha. And if you select stencil alpha, you'll have this really nice ability to crop your textures inside the shape of your glyphs, which is very, very cool. Because now if I add another shape to my Moglyph cloner here and choose, let's say, a cross, for example, or this cross here. Okay, as you can see, this is very, very cool. You have now these photographs cropped by a circle across, a circle across, because Moglyph cloner actually iterate through each glyph shape. You can also randomize them. And yeah, as you can see, this is very, very cool. Very nice option to play with. Of course, if you have something that is, let's say, remove this glyph to here, which corresponds to the cross shape. Okay. Actually, you can also, as you can see, I've changed the glyph number here to be 43. So the 43 is this one. And this is a rounded square, which is also very interesting. If I prefer this one, I could choose the 45. As you can see when I go over with my mouse cursor, I can see the number ID of these glyphs, which is 45. So if I prefer this, I can type 45 and have a square that is a bit less rounded on its cloner. So now I have both the circles and my rounded squares that are cropping my photographs. So this is very nice. But now if I go to Moglyph cloner and play with the gap, and if I have a negative gap, I will have my clones overlapping each other. And now you can see the problem that happens here. And this is due to, as you can see, this photograph here of this girl on the red wall overlaps and go in front of the other one that is here. So this is normal, and unfortunately this can't be done differently, and this is a limitation of BoundaryFill plugin because it can't composite each clone separately from each other. So it will keep all the clones as one entity, and the textures will be applied as one other layer on top of that. So this is why you have this. So this is something to keep in mind, but otherwise I really like the fact that I can, if I have a gap between them, to have something like that. Actually, I can go up to 0, and since the size is perfectly matched, because I had calculated the correct scale values here, I can see that it works perfectly. Okay, so 20% in my case is perfect, but you'll have to calculate because my textures are exactly 500 pixels. So I know that my shapes in MoglyphFX are exactly 100 pixels. And I made the calculation that it was a 5 ratio, so 1/5. So you have to divide 100 by 5 in my case. So this is very, very nice, interesting distribution, very cool. And actually it doesn't move because I'm on a random still frame, and this is what I wanted. If you want to, you can still play with random loop. And in this case, it will randomize the animation based on your clones. So this is very cool. And this is also due to the time offset 0.04 in my case, as I explained before. So I prefer to stick with random still frame for my demonstration. Yeah, this is how you deal with, so let's put a bit of gap back here, and this is how you deal with dynamic scale. And another thing you can do is to play with, if I remove this glyph shape because I want to stick with the circle. Actually, I will just remove all my glyph shapes. I will go back to my perfect square by selecting my glyph 2 and glyph 1 effect here, go to Other in Moglyph FX tab and remove Glyphs. And now I can go to my Moglyph cloner, and I will replace this perfect uniform square by another shape that is not uniform. So to do that, I will go to the Moglyph Basic Geometry drop-down list and select the Moglyph Directional font, which is this nice arrow icon here, and click on Add New Glyph, and I will select something like this, for example. So this nice capsule shape, so glyph number 12, and if I go to BoundaryFill, and if I go to transform mode, not stencil alpha, but behind, I can now see that the shape I've put, the capsule I've clicked in the Add New Glyph button is there. It's 100 pixel tall, but it's not uniform, so it's smaller than 100. So now my textures adapt to the width of my clone. But if now I choose to dynamic scale based on not fit width but fit height, the textures now are perfectly aligned with the height of my capsule. So it may be easier to figure out if you stick with in front and not behind. So now you can see the capsule is in front of my textures, and as you can see, the textures perfectly match the height of my capsule. And if you have in the transform, if you rotate the rotation Z of your clones like that, as you can see, the size of the textures will perfectly match the height of my shape, even if it's rotated, because we are set to fit height here. Okay, so this is very cool. You can also play with fit diagonal. As I explained before, it will stick with the initial diagonal. But if I stick with fit height and play with transform mode, not to be in front but stencil alpha, as you can see, if I turn them, the texture will always have enough pixels to fill the capsule, because I'm with fit height. If I stick with fit width, which is the default, as you can see, it won't work correctly because of what I explained just before. So this is important to keep in mind. So if I stick with fit height and not fit width by default, I can also not rotate from Moglyph cloner rotation Z here. So if I zero rotation Z out, and if I apply a random effector to my cloner by selecting it and go to Moglyph FX effectors tab and click on random. If I play the animation, as you can see, it will randomize the scale and animate the scale of my clones by default, which is very nice if you want to have this kind of organic scale motion. You can also choose to not scale them with the effector random. So in this case, I want to go to parameters, transform. I don't want the scale to be animated, so I will put 0. And I will go to rotation Z. And now if I play with rotation, as you can see, it will always try to fit the texture. Sometimes, as you can see here, it fails to do that correctly. So in this case, I strongly advise you to change the BoundaryFill plugin dynamic scale option to be on fit diagonal, and to rescale them a bit manually until you have something that still works. So something like that. or maybe let's stick with, yeah, 20 remains the correct value here. So as you can see, whichever rotation I apply randomly to my capsules, it will manage to adapt the size of my textures. Of course, if you uncheck dynamic scale and check on the dynamic rotation instead, you will manage to rotate both the clones and their textures. So you will end up with this really nice kind of animation thanks to the power of Moglyph FX and its random effectors. And keep in mind that you can still play with any effector in Moglyph FX. So you can just imagine all the power and flexibility you'll have with both products. So now that we have seen all the basics, we'll try to create a nice photo carousel with BoundaryFill and Moglyph FX. To do that, I will reuse the pixel photo textures I already had. So again, it is exactly 500 pixels, but you can use any dimension you want. So 100 dimensions in my case, I will recall these values for later. And it's exactly 14 frames duration. And I will drag this pre-composition inside a bigger composition, which is exactly 1080 pixels wide and tall. And again, very important, it will be 25 as the frame rate, because again, I need a frame rate that is that allow me to have a finite frame duration. I will hide this pre-comp for now, and don't forget to go back to Moglyph basic geometry, which is the one with the square shapes as the default, and click on radial. And since we are in version 4.2, I now have the choice to either change, either choose a single circle distribution, which is the standard radial mode, in this case, click yes, or the multiple concentric circles. So I will choose single circle distribution, so I will click yes in my case. I know that I have exactly 14 photographs, so I will choose in my Moglyph cloner radial in object, I will choose a count of exactly 14. And as you can see, it's already overlapping them. So I will ensure first to not overlap, and I will increase the ring radius for now. Very important if you want to, I put 41 and not 14. So this is 14 clones. And yeah, by default, the clones are overlapping. So I will go a bit further in the radius, just in order for me to separate each clones from each other. And I will uncheck align clones, very important too, because just know that the radial, the spline, and the spiral cloners offer an option to align clones and rotate them based on the distribution. But since BoundaryFill relies on boundary box relies on bounding box of your clones, you can't rotate them before it hitting the text button, the save text button of BoundaryFill. So untick align clones first, very important. And now my distribution is ready to be used. So now I can just apply BoundaryFill. Again, I can just type boundary in my effect and presets panel and double click to apply it. So now the text isn't saved yet. So I have to go at the frame 0, ensure that every single clone is not rotated and very straight. And now I can hit text save. And now I can go to texture, and texture mode, I will stick with the default one layer. Texture layer, I will choose my pixels photo textures. And again, I know that my photographs are exactly 500 pixels wide and tall. So I have to go to transform and divide the scale from 100 by 5, because this is 5 times bigger than my 100 default square. So it gives me exactly 20% as a scale, which is perfect. So now if I click on shape only, I can see all my textures. So by default, exactly each frame will be playing just like my pre-comp, and I will end up with just empty clones after the duration of my pre-comp. But if I now choose the time sampling to be time offset still frame and put the correct value, which is in my case 1 divided by 25, because this is my frame rate, remember? So I've got now a perfect distribution of all my photographs in a circle ring. So very cool. Now I can, if I want to, enable rotation just if I want to. So if I check dynamic rotation and click on align clones, I have now all my clones correctly rotated. If you end up with a rotation that is not correct, you can still rotate them by going to BoundaryFill rotation and re-rotate them accordingly. So in my case, minus 90 degrees. And now I've got this really nice distribution of all my photographs. And now that my text save button have been hit once and it's not red, I can now overlap them if I want to. So I can go to ring radius and put the radius to a very low value, but be careful if you don't change the merge X and merge Y values, which are 50. And if I have a radius that is maybe 25, it will consider all my clones to be a single entity. So be careful and decrease those merge X values to 1 and merge values to 1 to merge Y2. And now I can have a ring radius that is maybe something like 0 or 1. And maybe merge X at 0 and merge Y at 0 will work too. I don't know. Yeah, let's put 0 in merge X and merge Y. And now all my photographs are stacked on top of each other. And now what I'm gonna do is to select my cloner and go to MoglyphFX, Effectors, and click on Formula, for example. And with my Formula effector, if I go to Parameters, Transform, and play with the position Y, I can see that now if I play the animation, I've got this really nice looping animation, wavy animation on Y. And I can change in the effector, in the curve animation option, I can play with the speed, I can loop and count duration. If I tick this option here, I can have maybe one single loop and play with a frequency of maybe, let's say 1 divided by 14. So now I have this really cool animation that wouldn't be possible with any other technique, and it's fully looping and procedural. So this is really great. And you can also play with minimum value to zero it out and have all the clones remain at the center at the beginning of the animation that is pushing apart each clone in a formula wave, really cool way. And yeah, using the formula effector is one way to animate the clones, but you have a lot of other possibilities with MoglyphFX. So let me demonstrate a few other ones. I will disable the effector formula right now just by clicking this little FX guy. And if I want to, let's say, distribute each clone one by one, like playing with playing cards, for example, and to focus on one at a time, I can also select my Moglyph cloner and click on plane effector. And the plane effector will push each clone on the y-axis because of the parameter transform position y, which is minus 100 by default. I will push it to 250, for example. And now what I'm gonna do is to play with the fall off option. So if I play with a completion tool, as you can see, I can progressively animate each clone Y by one, like this. And if I want to, I can also, let's say if I stick with 50% completion too, if I select my effector plane, and if I go to Moglyph Effectors tab and change the fall off shape, which is square fall off by default, I can select something like smooth fall off, for example. And now if I play with completion offset, I can create really nice animations like this, just as you would shuffle a playing cards game, right? So very, very cool effects also. If you don't want to have more than one single photo animated, you can just divide 100 by the number of clones, which is 14 by in our case. And now if I play with a completion offset, if I put minus 100 to 100, I will animate all the clones one by one. And actually this is not minus, yeah, if I remember correctly, this is just 0 minus the same value right there. Okay, so as you can see, this is the same amount as there, but with a minus sign before. And the completion offset, if you go from there to 100 exactly, you will be able to animate all your clones one by one. Of course, this is very quick because the duration is very fast, but you can of course have something way more longer and extend the keyframes altogether to create nice slow motion. So this is another way to do that. I will also disable the effector plane to showcase a last effect I wanted to show you, which is the delay effector. But before clicking it, I will also change the shape fall off back to square fall off, otherwise you will end up with something weird. So I will change for square fall off, which is default, and I will select my Moglyph Cloner radial layer again and click on delay effector. So once you click on this button, it will animate each clone Y by one with a really nice springy motion, and I really love this one. Look at this, really, really cool. And you can also create this animation, and towards the middle of your composition, you can also, if you type U on your keyboard, create a new keyframe animation on effector delay animation from 100 to 0. And in this way, you will be able to go back to the center of the ring and go back again. So it creates this really cool motion, and then after a while it goes back to the circle. So really, really cool. Of course, you have total control, since it's procedural, over the delay effector and the radius of the circle. So you have to go to the effector delay, parameter, transform, and this is due to the 100 on position Y, the radius of the circle. So you can of course increase that, and you can also put a bit more time spacing between each card. So you'll go over effector delay, animation order, and the offset here is 2 frames. You can increase this value, sorry, to something bigger. So you have each clone animated 5 frames after 5 frames. So this kind of motion. And as you can see here, the beginning of the clones are going back to the circle, and maybe this is too slow, so maybe something like this, for example. Yeah. And yeah, this is really nice, really cool animation. So for the moment, it's down one by one. So first clone to the last clone, because the effector delay relies on animation order that is based on ID order, but you can also do the reverse. So it will go first to the last, then to the first. As you can see, it goes counterclockwise. And you can also go outward, which is also a very nice way to animate such circle distributions, because now you have this symmetric animation, or inwards, okay, which is exact inverse. And you can also randomize this. So if I take a random, I have now this really nice animation. Really cool. So plenty of possibilities. And of course you can also, if I go back to ID order, you are not bound to stick with the elastic motion. You can go to effector delay animation remapping, and this is because it's set to remapping preset elastic. But you can also firstly, you can tweak the elastic bounce options properties. So if you have too much springs, you can have something maybe a bit more subtle and with a bit more damping. So now the animation is almost the same, but it's less nervous and a bit more subtle. So pretty nice. You can also choose to not be on elastic, but something like smooth, for example. And in this case, you'll have to go to smooth options and maybe keep in and out and increase the smooth iterations and maybe spread the keyframes a bit. So maybe something like this. And now you have something that is just smooth without even touching the interpolation of the keyframes. So yeah, it works very nicely. You can also play with maybe quantize. If you go to quantize options and if you keep 2, you will see this really nice animation that is kind of cut out and stop motion effect. You can increase, of course, those steps. So if you put something like 5, for example, you can see a really nice animation like a stop motion effect. So this is pretty nice, pretty cool. Again, I strongly advise you to play with the different effectors that MoglyphFX offers. So yeah, MoglyphFX plus BoundaryFill is a very, very flexible and powerful tools combo. Okay, there is also another part of this workflow that can be a little bit tricky. So let me show you what I mean. If you have something like, let's say, a bunch of playing cards like this one, and if I bring that into my main comp, as you can see, you have all the cards here. I will hide this. If I go to MoglyphFX and create a grid of that, and if you have, let's say, a bit more on count X like this, and maybe let's stick with that for the moment. So let's apply the boundary fill effect, and let's go to texture, stick with texture mode 1 layer, and choose the texture layer to be playing cards texture. And again, you have to go to transform and tweak the size in order to fit your clone's animation, your clone's dimensions, sorry. So in my case, it will be exactly 50 because the cards are also 100 pixel wide. And as you know now, one square from the default basic geometry font in MoglyphFX is exactly 100 pixels wide too. And if you go to enable and enable the dynamic scale, and if you go to text save and maybe play with merge X let's decrease that to 1 as we saw just before. So now if I click on shape only and if I select time sampling random still frame, I can now push my Y gap a bit to spread them out a bit more, something like that. Maybe I can have a bit more cards. No, actually I'm fine with these values. Okay, and the button is white, so it means that everything is okay. So what I wanted to show you is that if you have the scale of your clones that is exactly 0, it will break the setup. So let me show you. If you untick the boundary fill effects here, it will deactivate the whole boundary fill effect, and we have only our clones. You have to know that if you apply with MoglyphFX the effectors delay effector, and if you hold down shift, as you can see when I go over my cursor here, you will see that if you maintain shift while clicking this button, it will create an elastic scale apparition. So let's do that. So I will hold down the shift key and click on delay. And now if you play the animation, you have this really cool, really nice 1x1 animation with a nice elastic spring scale motion. But since there is a 0 scale for all the clones right now, except for this one here, BoundaryFill hasn't got any value, anything to analyze for the boundaries, the bounding box of your glyphs. So 0 scale means BoundaryFill will be broken. So in order to counter this, if I reactivate BoundaryFill, if I play the animation, as you can see, it works, but there is a problem. Before we had some still frames because I had chosen to have a texture that was random still frame, but as you can see, the button now is red. So if you could think that if you go back to frame 0 and click on text save, you will be safe. But as you can see, the button remains red. And this is because the glyph is 0 in size. So in order to avoid this, you have two different possibilities. First possibility is you can just go to either the effector delay parameter transform and find the values that tells the clones to be 0, and this is due to scale X and scale Y that are exactly minus 100% of their value, which means 0 in this case. So if you change these to something like very values that are really close to 100, like 99.99%, it will be almost the same, so you won't notice the difference. But for BoundaryFill, it's now not completely empty, right? So it's there is something. So if I do the same thing for scale Y, now if I go to BoundaryFill and if I click text save, as you can see, the button now is white. So it means that's okay, I've managed to find my glyph. So if I preview my animation now, this is not broken and it works perfectly. So this is something to keep in mind. Be careful with that kind of stuff. So this is the first way to change this, but I will undo that a few times just to retrieve my minus 100% on scale X and scale Y. And you can also select your layer, type U to find the animation slider from the effector delay, which has an expression on it. And as you can see, it goes from 100% to 0 here, okay? So if I go back to this very first keyframe here, if we not type exactly 100, but same thing, you just type 99.99%, it will do almost the same thing. But now if I go back to BoundaryFill and click the text save button again, this is the same thing. It will find the glyphs correctly. So now if I preview the animation also, you can also notice that it's working perfectly well. So yeah, just be aware of this limitation and know how to fix this issue here. So you can of course play with any kind of cloner available in MoglyphFX. So for example, you can select shape layer tool and draw a path like this, for example. Okay, cool. So something pretty simple. And I will uncheck the fill and just leave the contour, the stroke. I will select this and click on spline cloner with the shift key held down on my keyboard in order to force the spline cloner to be on count mode. So let's do that. And as you can see, I've managed to clone my squares along the spline. I want them to be way numerous, so I will add way more of them, and I will uncheck align clone for now. So something like this. Okay, cool. So ideally, I advise you to have all your clones not overlapping each other. So you can begin with that, and after a while you can add some counts, but it may break sometimes the BoundaryFill plugin, so maybe it won't work all the time. So I will first create this setup with a bit less on the count, just in order for me to separate my clones like that. So I will bring my playing cards textures from before, I will hide it and select my Moglyph Cloner FX, apply the BoundaryFill plugin, and merge X and Y. I will make them one on both axes, and choose texture, texture mode one layer, texture layer, playing cards, and random still frame, just like always, and transform as before. I will apply the 20% value in order to fit my squares that are 100 in width. And yeah, if I text save now, and if I increase the count, I can do something pretty cool, like choosing to draw only the shape only. So it gets rid of my green squares that were in front. And the button is red, but it still works, right? So if I play with the offset of the spline cloner, you will still be able to animate all the cards along the path. So this is pretty cool. And yeah, if I increase the count even more, and if I, let's say, play with the end and kind of crop the path like that, I can animate the offset slider to make really cool animations like this. So this is pretty nice, pretty great. The size here is a bit, so if I hide my initial path, I can play with the transform scale and maybe keep them a bit more bigger, so something like this. Okay, and the cool thing is that you can still edit the shape layers path after a while, so it will not break the setup. So this is pretty cool. And yeah, just by doing so, you can create really cool animations. So if I do offset here and go at the end of my animation and do that, okay, something like this. Yep. And if you go to texture, color, and play with the opacity, with the gradient, and blending, if you inverse the alignment here, as you can see now, the beginning of the stack is here. And if I uncheck the align reverse, it will be here. So I will just reverse the gradient, so that the first clone, which is this one in my example, will remain white, while this one will be darker and darker. And I will use a blend mode, which will be multiply. And now if I preview the animation, I've got something really nice. And yeah, really cool effect. So this is one other way to use Moglyph FX plus BoundaryFill plugin together. So yeah, I've got another cool example that I can show you, because you may not have noticed, but here you see that the corner of my cards is cut out like a real playing card, right? So this is because in my playing cards, if I make a dark background, like black for example, you can see that all my images are transparent, right? With a corner radius here. So this is just to say that BoundaryFill will of course respect the semi-transparency of your textures. So another cool example I can show you, let me purge the memory a bit. And yeah, another cool example I can show you, if I create a new composition of 1080 25, again this is important, and 5 duration and white background. Okay, cool. I can bring another kind of texture that is video texture, and this video is transparent, right? So if I check in and check this, you can see that this is a transparent animation. So this is a video I've rotoscoped with a rotobrush from After Effects, and I can use that as a texture for BoundaryFill. So let's do that. I will, just to demonstrate a few other cloners, I will create a linear cloner this time with the Alt and the Shift key held together, and it will force my cloners to be centered on the middle one. And I will add more clones like this, and maybe have a position a bit less spread out, something like that. The position Y, I will zero the position Y out. So I won't touch the scale because I don't want to rescale this BoundaryFill texture. And yeah, I will maybe ensure first that there is a gap, right? And yeah, I will just apply the BoundaryFill plugin again. Choose texture, merge X 1 instead of 50, same for merge Y. And I will choose as a texture layer my ice scatter texture. And now you can see all the videos are overlapping each other, which is pretty cool. And maybe I don't like when this video is cropped, so I will just ensure that the video is not cropped at any moment. So something like that. Yeah, it's okay. At the end it will be cropped, but it won't be a big deal. Okay, so now, as you can see, if I go to the button and click text save again, just for security, I will decrease the position X in the per step transform to something like 20, maybe, and add a bit more to the count, and I can click on shape only. And now you have this really cool animation, like almost like a slit scan effect, but it's not really that, because I want, like the echo native effect of After Effects, to have an offset in the timing. So let's do that by using the time sampling option, not to be the current frame, but to be time offset. And if I play with time offsets in second and type the same value than before, which is just for, as a reminder, it's 1 second divided by the frame rate, which is 25 in my case. And now look at this, really nice effect. It's almost like the slit scan effect, slit scan plugin, which is really cool. So this is pretty nice. You can achieve really cool VFX effects with just those kind of stuff. And if you don't want it to be cropped after a while, you can of course play with the time offset loop instead, and it will begin again and again and cycle through the whole animation and keep animating it. So of course in this case, because the girl is moving in the comp, it creates something a bit weird, but there is a gap here. But yeah, this is pretty cool, pretty nice animation. I love very much. I can also play with the color and play with something like yeah, if I put 100, the gradient, random, or check patterns, which is really cool too. You can create really interesting stuff, almost like cavalry-like effects. I love that. So yeah, don't hesitate to play with various kind of animated textures, and you will end up with very cool and interesting effects. There is also a last feature from BoundaryFill I want to talk about, which is the line feature. The line feature is almost like the texture feature that we have studied until now, because you have almost the same options at the beginning, so texture mode, transform mode, time sampling, time offset, etc. But you also have a few more options to play with. So in order to demonstrate this, I will create a new composition, and I will just click on this guy that I've just drawn, which is just a shape layer with a simple ellipse shape with a fill color which is red. Okay, just a simple shape layer. It's not even pre-composed. I will use it as it is because it's not animated. So I will create in MoglyphFX a radial cloner, which is a standard radial. So I will shift click to go faster, and just click create it as fast as possible. I will go to Moglyph cloner object group and have a few, just 4 clones exactly. I will uncheck align clones. Okay, so now I've got a square made of 4 different clones, which are regular green squares from MoglyphFX, and I will apply the boundary fill again. I will click on text save, and now instead of clicking on textures, I will click on line. And in the line group, you will be able to select also a texture layer. So in this case, for the line, you won't be able to choose between 1, 2, or 3 layers. You are bound to use a single layer, which is why I just have this texture layer slot to reference any other layer. So I will select my shape layer, like I can call it red ellipse, for example, and I will hide this. So Moglyph cloner, go to line, boundary fill, line, texture layer. I will reference this red ellipse shape layer, and as you can see, instantly I'm able to populate some connections between my glyphs, which is also very nice. And you may have noticed that this part is not filled yet, and this is because in the line option you have to drill down, go to enable subgroup, and click on closed, because yeah, this is a circle, so I want to close it, right? So this is what it gives when I click on closed. And now if I go, if I increase the ring radius from my cloner, as you can see, there is more and more ellipses, right? So maybe you don't recognize it. I will make the shape layer a bit smaller, something like that. So I can almost count them, right? And I can also click on boundary fill shape only, so I don't see my squares anymore. And I can also count my different ellipses. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 ellipses right now. And this is because I've got a ring radius that is 200. But if I reduce that as you can see, the number of red ellipses increase or decrease depending on the radius, depending on the distance actually from each clones. So this is pretty cool. If I replace this by something else that is not a red ellipse, but maybe I can reuse my nice pixels photographs that are these ones. Okay, let's do that. I will again go to texture layer, select my pixels photo textures, go to transform, just like for the texture group. I will decrease these guys to 20% too. And now if I choose the generator mode in line to be in interval and not in copies, because copies give me an exact amount of copies. So if I type 5, for example, or 8, okay, it arranges to have exactly, so if I disable closed, yeah, I've got exactly the same amount I wanted. I prefer to use the interval value because I can now just play with an interval, and if I increase this value, I can have a gap that will be automatically added between each segment, which is very nice. And now if I play with the ring radius, I will be able to populate my connections with more and more clones. So I can also decrease a bit more the interval, or it really depends on what you want to achieve, but yeah, you can just play with that. And yeah, look at this. This is really, really cool. So you can go crazy with the animation. And of course, you have the exact same options than for the texture. So you can play with time sampling and choose, for example, time offset still frames or a random still frame, and play with time offset to be based on 0.0.4. And or you can have a loop animation. So now you have this kind of animation, and you can just go crazy with the cloner radius, which is awesome. Okay, look at that. Very, very nice effect too. So yeah, the line feature of BoundaryFill, sorry, is a bit special, but I wanted to showcase it at least one single time because it opens up new possibilities that weren't possible before. And don't hesitate to play with this option with other kind of cloners. Maybe I can create a new comp, and I will this time click on cloner, but click on no to create a concentric rings cloner. This one, I will uncheck the align to target. I will just purge the memory a bit because I've recorded a bunch of things since a few minutes now. And so now if I skip at start and maybe have yeah, this kind of torus shape like this, I can apply a boundary fill effect again, click on text save, and I will create again a small shape layer. This time I can use maybe an ellipse. Okay, can be some keyframes and some keyframed animation as well, can be anything. I will have a red fill color and decrease this again to have just a little dot, maybe 10. Okay, and now if I hide them and click on Moglyph cloner rings, I've already clicked on text save. I can choose line and click on texture layer, select my shape layer, and as you can see, if I play with the interval or the copies, I can have if I go to enable closed, no, I don't want to be closed. Okay, look at this. With the copies, I can see that the first clone is this one, second, third, fourth, and you can clearly see now the order of creation of my clones. So this is a nice way to achieve cool other stuff. You can also play with the ring steps here, and maybe decrease those values, and yeah, you got the idea. So this is one way to use that. You can also play with a spiral cloner, which is also great. So I can click on it, and you have this nice Fibonacci cloner. I can play with an object, uncheck normalize clone size, uncheck center outward downsizing a bit, or maybe I can, yeah, normalize clone size. I want align clone, so I will tick off this option, and I will turn them manually to make them straight. So let's see, okay, something like that. You have to eyeball it because you can't calculate the rotation. This is based on the count here. So I will check on back the normalized clone size, and if I apply again, actually let's copy this shape layer. So I've just copied the red dot, which is here. I can select my Moglyph spiral cloner here, apply the boundary fill, click on text save, go to line, go to texture layer, and reference my shape layer, and look at this. Very, very cool. You have a whole new distribution type, a whole new effect, right? So if you decrease this value, you will have more and more circles. So if I type 10, for example, as you can see, the plugin is very responsive because this is a real plugin and not a script. So it don't rely on expressions like a Moglyph FX, which makes BoundaryFill very, very useful and powerful. So this is a great way to add some more complexity to your setups. And of course, you are not bound to have a red dot, but you can add anything, even a pre-comp with some animated stuff. So this is pretty cool. You can also play with the random interval. You can play with the overlap distance. Okay, as you can see, it does something. If you can play with overlap smoothness, something like this, and you can see there is like a gradient that is beginning to fade the little circles. I will undo that. I can also colorize them with the color here, which is the same option than in the texture slot. So I can increase the opacity. And you have this really nice gradient that goes from first clone to the last one. And you can have a check pattern, and yeah, really, really cool effects too. So you can have an alternate color for each clone. Well, you already know that from the texture that I've demonstrated before. So you can also play with the start and the end. So it allows you to kind of animate the transition a bit like a trim path, right? So if I see those two little guys here, I can increase this value, and now it has trimmed this portion of the path here. So I increase it a bit, and this is really like a trim path. So this is really nice, and it allows you to create like custom dashed connection strokes between your Moglyph FX clones, which is awesome. So this is it for BoundaryFill overview if you use it with Moglyph FX. I really hope you like it as much as I do, and hats off to the creator of BoundaryFill 2, because this is such an amazing tool. And again, you will find both Moglyph FX and BoundaryFill on aescripts, so here and here. So as you can see, Moglyph FX and BoundaryFill are both available as separate products on aescripts.com, but you can also, as I said at the beginning of the video, have them both with a discount of 15% of the total price, which is awesome. So this is a very interesting combo, very powerful, very flexible, and a really nice deal to have. So unsure if you want both products, to click on this button here, which is called Add Both to Cart, in order for the discount code to be applied automatically. So yep, this is it. Hope you like it, and see you later for awesome other stuff. Bye guys.